Hi, my name is Henry Emmons, and I am going to talk to you today a bit about how to keep yourself resilient as you're embarking on your great adventure. You're either a student preparing to go on a Rotary program, or maybe a parent who is getting ready to send your child off, and either way, that's a stressful thing. That's what's called a good stress. Stress itself is neither good nor bad, it's just something we all experience. But even good stress is still stressful. And so I want to talk a bit today about how to manage that, how to work with that, and really how to keep yourself resilient. So resilience, as I understand it, is completely a natural thing. If you look at nature, all of the natural world is resilient, which means that it's normal and natural to be able to bounce back, to withstand a whole host of changes and challenges, and to keep yourself relatively balanced and afloat no matter what it is that you have to contend with. Obviously, some things are harder and more challenging than others, but I believe if you keep attending to a few basic things, you can keep yourself in a state of being able to face these things no matter how hard or challenging they are. I use a metaphor to talk about resilience, which is this image of a water cooler. So if you just picture this upside down jug and imagine that all of you have something like this within your brain, and in that container there's an elixir that keeps you, relatively healthy and afloat and able to face the challenges in your life. Now, genetics make a difference here, and everybody has a different capacity. There are people who have a huge container, a huge capacity to stay resilient, and it takes a lot of different things to kind of bring them down. And then there's other people for whom it takes very little, or at least relatively little, because they just don't have as much of this stuff. If you think about this in terms of genetics and just what you're born with, there's not much you can do to change the size of this capacity. But there's a lot that you can do to determine whether it stays filled up or not. And I like to emphasize, no matter how large or small this container, as long as you don't let it become completely empty or drained, you are going to be able to feel okay, no matter what's going on. But if there's enough things that happen in a pretty short period of time, or if you've gotten kind of depleted, then you are subject to having your resilience erode. And it's important to talk a little bit about that and how that looks. I believe that each one of us has a kind of a weak link, that there's some vulnerability that we all have, and everybody's is a little different. So what happens to you is going to be different than what happens to me or the person sitting next to you when we're really, really stressed. But here are some of the things that you might experience, some of you, or you might want to think about as you're embarking on this journey. And you can see the list here. Some people feel homesick. There can be culture shock, accidents, anxiety, depression, or other kind of mood problems. Some people, when they're really, really stressed, they'll try to control their eating and develop some kind of eating disordered patterns. Other people might use substances like alcohol or drugs, or develop some kind of physical illness. Obviously, we want to do what we can to prevent these things, and if they occur, to deal with them as quickly as we can so that you can have a really great experience. One of the most common ways that people experience this erosion of resilience is with mood or anxiety. It's an extremely common thing, and some of the recent surveys looking at people entering college say that about 1/3 of college students have had trouble functioning within the past year because of depression. It's a really big number, 1/3. And half of college students feel overwhelmed by anxiety and stress, and about 1/3 of them are taking medications. So this is really something to pay attention to, and I want you to know that there are a lot of things that you can do that can prevent these kind of problems, and even if they start to occur, there are things you can do to get yourself feeling right again. So I'm going to talk about this with what I call the roots of resilience. And I will go over 7 of them. These are 7 different categories of things that you can think about and work with that can really help you continue to feel well and function well. So the first of these, first root of resilience, is to keep your brain functioning and well balanced, which is largely done through your diet. If you think about it, it just makes sense that in order for your brain to make the different chemicals it needs to feel well, and for you to keep thinking clearly and functioning well, you have to give your brain the nutrients that it needs, the ingredients that it needs to make those different chemicals and to function properly. And that only can come through your diet. There's no other way for the body to get those ingredients. Eating well, eating healthy is the one sure thing that you can do to ensure that you're getting those things. And it is always helpful. It never makes things worse to eat better. But eating well is sometimes a complicated thing, more so than it probably should be. You're going to be in situations where you don't always have a lot of control over what you eat. Some of us, when we're stressed, we eat more and maybe start choosing foods that aren't always healthy for us. And others, when we're stressed, maybe eat less and then lose weight. And if you're losing weight, your brain is not getting the nutrients it needs to work well. So there's a really simple way to think about how to eat well for brain balance. And that is this quote by Michael Pollan. He says, "Eat food, not too much, mostly plants." Eat food. Sounds pretty obvious, but it's not quite as simple as it sounds. When he says eat food, he means something very specific. Eating real food that has not been changed, that has not been processed too much. Processed food includes sugar. It includes white flour. It includes packaged goods. So to the extent that you can, it's good to eat foods that are really in their natural state, that have had to be prepared rather than have already been prepared for you and boxed up in some way. And it's good to eat things that don't have too many things added to them. So a lot of different chemicals, a lot of different hormones and milk and so forth. You want to eat things that are as close to their natural state as possible. Second thing here he says is not too much. And again, when some of us are stressed, the tendency is to eat too much, and especially to gravitate towards comfort foods, things like sugar and maybe white flours, breads and pastas, and the kind of things that temporarily make us feel better, but if we keep doing that for very long, it starts to affect brain chemistry in a way that is really hard on the mood. So not eating too much, and then eating mostly plants, fruits and vegetables. You don't have to be a vegetarian, but if you think about your plate, looking at a round plate, ideally, about a half of that would be some kind of fruits and vegetables, about a quarter of it would be some kind of protein, and then about a quarter of it would be some sort of grain or starch, like potatoes or rice or what have you. As we go, I'm going to give you a few tips from a girl who was on Rotary a few years ago, and she says things in a way that's probably better than I can say because she's lived it and experienced it, and she's closer to your own experience. Her name was Hannah, and then here's one of her tips. She says, "You will likely gain weight. Food is comforting and a universal gift. When you're at a table and don't speak the language, what do? You eat. A lot of the ways we socialize is through food. Offered food as a welcome, take second helpings, emotional eating. These are the kind of things that can lead to that eating too much. So be mindful of that, and then also remember to stay active." So that really brings us to our second root of resilience, which is to manage your energy well. I think the best way to get more energy is to spend energy in a sort of a controlled way. We do that mostly through what we call exercise or movement. Chances are that most of you are going to have an opportunity to get a fair amount of exercise, maybe even more than you do at home, for one simple reason. And that is that in most other countries, people walk a lot more than we do here. Walking is absolutely fine. It's a great form of exercise. You don't have to always get your exercise through, doing drills or routines or lifting weights. It's great to do those things, but walking, swimming, easy biking, these things are all perfectly good too. The important thing to remember is to keep yourself moving. Try to get in an hour per day, which can be broken up into chunks, almost every day. Try to get some of it more aerobic, where you're really getting your heart rate up, at least 3 times a week if possible. And then if you're so inclined, it is really helpful to do something that includes strength building or strength training. In my view, yoga, where you're using your body weight, is a form of strength training. So if you have access to yoga classes or you like to do that, that's a perfectly good way to get the good strength building as well as some calming benefit for your mind. I do want to say again that exercise doesn't have to be in the way that we usually think of it. Some people use the term non-exercise, which simply means moving your body, keeping yourself from being sedentary, not sitting all of the time. The third root of resilience then, which is also some way of caring for our body, is to remember that all of nature has rhythms, and we have to honor those, and we have to live within those rhythms ourselves if we're going to feel good. The most important of those natural rhythms is sleep. And I want to really emphasize this because my work is as a psychiatrist, and I have come to believe that if you want to prevent any kind of more serious mental health problem, the most important thing that you can do is to take care of your sleep. It is incredibly protective. It stabilizes the mood. It keeps your mind working more efficiently and keeps your focus up. And it has a lot to do with this thing that I'm calling resilience. Just share with you very briefly this study that looked at teens with what they called mental toughness. And that's another way of saying resilience, able to handle really challenging things. And they found that kids who had this trait of mental toughness slept deeper, they didn't wake up as much, they didn't have as much tiredness or sleepiness during the day. They stayed resilient throughout their teenage years, and if they sustained this trait of mental toughness, they had less experience of stress, and the ability to keep sleeping a healthy number of hours allowed them to stay more mentally tough and resilient through their adolescence. How many hours is the right number to sleep? It does vary a bit from person to person. I think most people need between 7 and 9 hours a night. And for teens, depending on how far along you are in adolescence, you probably need on the higher side of that, more like 8 or 9 hours per night. There are some things that affect sleep, and I want to say a bit about these. Caffeine is one thing that hurts people's sleep, and some more than others. So if you're somebody who can have a cup of coffee or tea in the mornings and you have no problem sleeping, great, don't worry about that. I do that myself. But if you go through a stretch where you are not sleeping well, even having caffeine in the morning can affect that sleep. So be really, really conscious of that. Doesn't matter what time of day it is. If you're not sleeping at night, try to get rid of the caffeine. Remember, there's caffeine in coffee, tea, mini sodas, or especially colas, and Mountain Dew, and then chocolate. Something that helps with sleep is to eat light in the evenings. This could be a challenge for a lot of you, but if you're at some event or if you're with a family and they're pattern is to eat really late at night or eat big meals kind of late in the day. If you're having trouble sleeping, just remember that this can affect you, and try to just keep your own eating a little bit lighter. Anytime after, say, 7 o'clock at night. Most people consider it best to have your largest meal in the middle of the day. A lot of cultures still do that. We tend not to do that in our country, but if you have the opportunity, think about having your biggest meal in the middle of the day, eat light in the evening. And then one other thing to mention that can really help with sleep, and so I've talked about how many hours to sleep, but it's also really important to think about the timing of your sleep and how regular is it. That might even make a bigger difference in terms of mental health than how many hours you're sleeping. So the key there is to try to get yourself up at about the same time every single day. Even if you stayed up late at night, think about trying to get up within an hour of the usual wake-up time. And then if you've had a short night of sleep, take a little nap later in the day, 45 minutes or less. I have this in your slides because I want to remind you that getting exposed to bright light early in the day is a really, really good way of regulating your circadian rhythms. Probably more important if you're in a climate or a latitude where the days get really short, like they do in Minnesota. So in the winter, wherever you are, if you're experiencing really short days, it's good to have bright light exposure early in the morning, sometime between 7 and 9 a.m. It'll help keep your circadian rhythms normal. The fourth root of resilience is to seek a calm mind. Easier said than done, but if we can pay some attention to how stress is affecting us and how what we're doing to either let our mind get overactive or let our mind calm down, there are things we can do to deal with stress more effectively. So I mentioned before that stress is neither good nor bad, but in some ways it does have different effects on us. So stress, what we call stress, is in many ways just a totally natural thing. It is just what we feel when we're reacting to pressure, whether that pressure comes from outside of us or from within us. It's what's called the fight or flight response, a completely natural way of reacting when you feel threatened in any way. Doesn't matter if the threat is real or not. If you react to that, you're having that fight or flight reaction. It's normal. But stress, when we get really, really activated and we feel really stressed, it doesn't just go away. It stays in our body or it stays in our minds, and we have to think about whether it's too much and we need to do something to release it or balance it. In nature, animals deal with stress in a completely normal, natural way. This title of the book I refer to here is Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And what the author is saying here is that in nature, animals don't develop stress-related illnesses because they don't suffer from chronic stress. Now, it turns out it's really stressful to be a zebra once in a while. And as you see in this slide, if you're being chased by a lion, even if you have a motorcycle to get away, by the way, that was photoshopped. It's not a real thing here. But what the author, again, is saying, this Robert Sapolsky is the one who wrote this book, he says, people have evolved to be smart enough to make ourselves sick. What he's saying really is that it is our thinking. It's our minds that can create some of these illnesses, and we have to be able to respond to this, and we'll talk a little bit more about ways that you can do this. But I do want to say here that I want to encourage you to pay attention to what is activating your mind and what is calming it. And there are a lot of things that activate our minds, including constantly checking our cell phone, our emails, our texts, having to shift our attention really fast from one thing to another. It puts our mind in kind of an activated state. Being exposed to new, challenging, sometimes frightening things puts your mind into an activated state. So it's really, really helpful to learn a simple technique that you can use to calm your mind. And it might be as simple as learning to pay attention to your breath, learning an easy meditation or a simple yoga posture that connects your body and mind in a way that brings your stress level down. The fifth root of resilience is to become comfortable with your emotions, even the strong emotions that don't always feel good. So one of those strong emotions that some of you may experience, certainly not everybody, but some of you might, is what's known as culture shock. This is when you go into a surroundings or environment that's so unfamiliar to you, and the way of life is so different that it just feels like it's really hard to adjust to. It can be confusing. It can make you feel nervous. Their ways of living and ways of dealing with things can be so different that you don't know how to respond or how to make sense to that. Just know that this is a pretty normal reaction when you're confronted with something so different and so foreign to you, and it will get better if you can stick with it and just not allow yourself to react too much. But the feeling of being uncomfortable or maybe frightened or whatever is normal. It's okay to have those feelings. If they're too strong, you need to find out a way to deal with them, maybe talk with somebody about them, but the feelings themselves are really normal and can even be healthy if you allow yourself to have them. Another example of sort of a really strong feeling that can be sometimes hard to deal with is feeling homesick, feeling blue or sad or down because you're missing so much the people or the environment that you're used to. Again, this is a pretty normal thing. It's going to happen more to some of you than it is to others, but having that experience does not make you weak or depressed or what have you. It's a fairly normal reaction for a lot of us when we go away, especially for the first time. And it also will pass if you learn to do some simple things with this. So if you have something that's really out of the ordinary, if you get really sick, let's say you develop some kind of illness, an infection or something, you have to be hospitalized. If any of these really, major events occur, again, it happens. It's not a sign that there's something wrong with you per se, but it's important for you to reach out, to stay connected, to make sure you keep communicating so you don't feel like you're in this alone. That brings us to the sixth root of resilience, which is to keep your heart open. You have such a great opportunity here to grow, to learn to kind of become a greater person than you are through your experiences. And you will do so to a larger degree if you're able to stay open and permeable and let these great experiences and connections with people, let them into you. So here's another set of tips from Hannah for how to do this. She says, be prepared to make a fool of yourself. Don't take yourself too seriously. Have goals for yourself. Speak the language, have goals in school, create little personal goals that you can achieve. If you get sick, tell your host family. Don't be afraid to tell your family the truth. Don't withdraw and become isolated. That's one of the hardest things you could do to be able to have a great experience. And then finally, the seventh root of resilience is to stay connected. I guess we've said this in different ways, but don't deal with your stress by yourself. That's not how any of us do it in a healthy way, and it's not good for you to try and do it all by yourself. It's not a sign of strength to try to handle all this by yourself. So talk with your host family or a Rotary representative, or stay connected with your family back home, friends, school counselors, teachers, religious leaders. Find someone that you trust, that you can open up to, that you can stay connected to. And then finally, the last of Hannah's tips, she says, develop a support system in your host country and know that you have one back home. Little letdowns will really bring you down. What am I doing here? You are different, and sometimes you will not fit in. Every adolescent wants to fit in. Be active with someone, family, sports, get involved. And finally, be well, be healthy, be safe, and have a great time. Thank you.